And we're live. Oh, greetings. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I just realized I have a bad echo. I need to suppress it. I'll be right back. Apologies for that little snafu. Such is the nature of YouTube. So I want to thank all the viewers and listeners who are joining me for this stream. It's a little bit off topic, but I didn't have any other avenue to announce some of this stuff. There's some urgent things going on in my church. And normally drama like this, it's like, well, if you're part of a small church, say 20 people that just meet in a rented room, if you all can't get along, you just leave. But what's at stake here is hundreds of millions of dollars. And I got involved in this because I feel that a group of leaders have taken over leadership of the church, and they stand to be able to control a lot of money, and they could line their pockets pretty well just by using maybe perhaps not the most ethical means of taking control and becoming leaders, and then taking control of the property and the assets of the church. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do if you're very charismatic. It's in some respects it's low risk. It's a low risk maneuver as far as an investment of money. But if you're able to do a very powerful job of marketing and getting rid of your opponents who have the right to vote you in office or vote you out, you can make a killing. And this does tie into why it's, for me personally, it's important to study evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. Because if our Christianity is based solely on the behavior and charisma of other people, that's on shaky ground. I recently was in a Sunday school Bible study led by a very godly man. He's a professor, was a professor at the United States Naval Academy, has served the Lord faithfully for years. And he cited something in Romans, the book of Romans, that talked about what the gospel is. And I think it's in Romans 10. Talked about what the gospel is. I'm having a terrible echo here. I inadvertently triggered something, triggered the actual YouTube video. I'm going to cut down the volume so I don't have that annoying echo anymore. So let me look up Romans 10 here. I think let me look at Romans 10:10. I'm sorry if this presentation is just a little clunky. I've had to put it together kind of under duress, given that there are legal maneuvers happening at this megachurch. And, some of us are seeing what's going on. And there's, we don't think it's right that money that was donated, hundreds of millions of dollars effectively that were donated for one purpose, is now being used and possibly taken over by leadership that doesn't care about the wishes of the people who donated it. And there are probably some both ethical and maybe legally contractual things that are being violated, and that money could be uh, not appropriated for the intended use that the money was donated for. And I find that very troubling. So this isn't about me trying to get anyone else in office at the church at this point. I mean, I've often said, would I want my friends to be captain of the Titanic? This church had peak attendances on Sunday morning of 18,000. Now, granted, that's kind of like an Easter Sunday. It could have been 21,000. Who knows? Could have been an Easter Sunday phenomenon. But within a couple years from that peak, we're now setting records at my church for record lows since that peak. I mean, up until I was trespassed and threatened with arrest in jail, and still haven't been given an explanation exactly why, I counted on the order of 3,000 people. So this could be like a 75% drop, maybe in just a few years time, few meaning like 3 years. I mean, I'd have to look at the numbers again, but this is just carnage. So let me look at. So I'm trying to bring up this passage in Romans chapter 10, and because it has relevance, what we see happening in the church can affect people's faith. And I know that when I nearly left the faith 22 years ago, if something like this happened, I probably would have had a hard time coming back, because I said, maybe this is all just a charade to build people or their money, and for individuals to gain a lot of power and influence. And I just remember recently, even Vladimir Putin was quoting from the Gospels when he was trying to justify his war with Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin said, Jesus told us, greater love hath no man than to lay his life down for his friends. Greater love hath no man than to lay his life down for his friends. The amazing thing is, this was coming out of Vladimir Putin's mouth in a speech about his war, or special military action on Ukraine, and the barbarism that was committed against civilians is not consistent with that loving spirit. But why would he say that? People that want to retain power try to justify what they're doing with kind of a moral force, and they'll appeal to just high-sounding moral principles like loving one another and caring and unity and getting rid of the bad guys. And I'm just pointing that, what I'm seeing going on in the leadership is they're kind of I mean, if you saw the congregational meeting tonight, it looks so pious. Oh my goodness. I mean, it just reminded me of Vladimir Putin saying, the words of Jesus, greater love hath no man than to lay his life down for his friends. And yet underneath there's this very sinister purpose, despite the high sounding, the high moral calling that was coming out of Vladimir Putin's mouth. I mean, it sounded, if to the uninformed, it just looks very persuasive and noble. And that's what I saw at the congregational meeting tonight via video. It was all very well orchestrated, people looking so pious and saying, we're going to spend hours praying. We've prayed, we've considered this, and, we're trying to do the right thing because we love you and care for you. And, I got to tell you something. If 80% of the congregation who left McLean Bible in the last 3 years really felt that they were loved and cared for. I don't think they would have left. They actually, as a matter of fact, as I've talked to many of these people, felt very unloved. They felt abused. They felt manipulated. They felt unwelcome. And they're shown the door. So I got to give the guys who put on the show tonight like Academy Awards for production, for direction, for acting. I mean, it was good. I mean, if you wanted to just give an appearance of being holy and pious to the rest of the world, oh my goodness, this was the best show. I mean, these guys deserved an Academy Award. But Jesus said, people by their fruits. And the fruit of what this leadership has done is decimated the church. I could show you some graphs. So why don't I'll go to that graph. But how this relates to Christian apologetics is that now I found that quote in Romans. Let me share it with you. It's Romans chapter 10, verse 9. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And to me, that is one of the most succinct statements of the gospel right there. It's rooted in your belief that Jesus rose from the dead. It is not in your belief in people or preachers or even me. God forbid that you believe in me, because I'm just a flawed human being like everyone else. What you believe is that Jesus rose from the dead miraculously. Now, that's kind of hard to do if you're, a fact-oriented, skeptical person in the 21st century, believing in an event that was believing a certain event, namely the resurrection, was historical. So we, like detectives on this channel, have tried to examine it in the available evidence in an impartial way that at least, for those inclined to believe or who want to believe, will see that the evidence is reasonable. It's not non-existent. And I know many on this channel have experienced miraculous answers to prayer, or God has done something in your life. And that does something to help people believe. When the Apostle Peter raised someone from the dead, I believe her name was Tabitha, in the book of Acts, people that didn't see the resurrection of Jesus, when they see a miraculous act done in the name of Jesus Christ like that, they're inclined to believe. And I know people personally, and also even just in passing, that have powerful testimonies, like astronaut Charles Duke, the youngest man to ever walk on the moon. He prayed for a blind girl. The blind girl got healed. This does raise tough theological questions, why God wouldn't be as obvious as the air we breathe. And I have said that that's part of his plan. It's part of winnowing out those who really want to seek after him versus those that want nothing to do with him. And God will not make it easy for you to find that evidence, but it is there if you're willing to seek after it. And also, most importantly, that God provides a path for you to find it. So let me just take a little break here. I want to acknowledge my good friends and supporters, Andrew Graham and Patrick Alexander. People like you have made this channel just so valuable to me personally. I consider you guys just great supporters to lift me up emotionally when I just, start talking about all sorts of things, and it's a great chance for me to fellowship. So now off to more the specifics of what's going on at McLean Bible Church. I will point you to those who are looking at this website, restoremclean.com. So why don't I go there right now and show you a graph. Oh, by the way, the thumbnail was, before I move on, this quote: discernment is not a matter, or I'd say discernment is not merely a matter of telling the difference between right and wrong. Rather, it is telling the difference between right and almost right. Discernment is not a matter of telling the difference. Discernment is not merely a matter of telling the difference between right and wrong. Rather, it is telling the difference between right and almost right. Maybe one way to visualize this, there's the famous story of William Tell, and he had to save his son's life, he had to fire an arrow and at an apple sitting on his son's head. He had to hit the apple. If he was off, one, if the arrow was too low, it'd go right into his son's head and kill his son. If he missed, he was going to be executed. Anyway, he had to hit right on the mark. So the word sin is, in the Greek, it's related, hamartia. It's related to the idea of an arrow missing the mark. So when someone sins in the New Testament, the word is, you've missed the mark. And that story of William Tell is a great illustration. So discernment is not, it's not merely a matter of telling the difference between right and wrong. It's telling the difference between right and almost right, because almost right can be also lethal. And maybe let me see if I could find that a picture of William Tell shortly. Otherwise, I'll give up. William Tell. Let's see if there's an image. I mean, I like visual images to just emphasize the point. And okay, so this is what William Tell had to do when he fired the arrow, and it was from a long distance. Here it is. And so the arrow was on the mark. If it's just slightly off the mark, the Greek word for that is sin. The Greek word for that of missing the mark is sin, and in this case, it's bad. And so, I'm not gonna say that the leadership is way off mark. They're not. If you saw kind of their shows, what they stage, sounds really, really good. And someone had said you could put a little cyanide, enough to kill someone, in their orange juice. They wouldn't even know it was there, but it was poisonous. And so, I'm not going to take apart every little thing that they said and try to just oppose it, because a lot of what they said is just beautiful sounding and pious. But I got to point out something. And so let me go to restoremclean.com here. And I'll show you first evidence that something is really wrong. Okay, so I'm going here to this website, restoremclean.com. I want you to look at the 60-year history. The 60-year history of attendance at McLean Bible. And I want you to see, I hope it's pretty evident what has happened in just the last few years. This graph is actually not as up to date as it could be. It's the most recent data I had before they threatened me with arrest and jail right after I posted this graph publicly. I was doing precise counts in McLean Bible. The dotted line indicates the actual numbers I counted on Sunday morning. The solid line indicates their own official congregational reports. They have since made updates to this, and they're setting records even according to their own official reports. But the real number could actually be all the way down here. Down here at 3,000. So let me introduce the major players that are still part of McLean. Dale Sutherland has since left, but he created a partnership that has cost the church a lot of problems. It's an SBC affiliation, if not in name, certainly in deed. So Dale Sutherland's no longer part of McLean, but then there's David Platt, Mike Kelsey, and Wade Burnett, and they are major players in this in the lawsuit. They are the defendants. Maybe not explicitly, but certainly their leadership is being called into question. And so that's the evidence, first off, that something's very wrong. And some individuals like myself have said, okay, this is a church led by the congregation. Is that right? This is not a dictatorship where the leaders are beyond questioning or beyond removal. And so what this lawsuit is about is, it's not, I really want to emphasize, this is not about it's not solely about what preachers we have on Sunday morning. For me, this is about $200 million, where I think some people that seem to lack accountability, who have lots of, who have not proven to me that they're going to be good stewards of that large amount of money. For all you know, they could get rid of the entire congregation once they consolidate their power, and they can do whatever they want with that money. And they are now, they're in a position to appropriate that money and those resources away from its intended use. To me, that is highly unethical. Independent of maybe the minutia of the legal things, if I did that to anyone, it would really bother my conscience. I could not live with myself. And so they're trying to frame it as, this is a doctrinal dispute, or, it's unbiblical. And I'm just like, this is, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to, Philip M is asking, oh, I'm so glad, by the way, Philip, if you're asking, by the way, brother, if you are part of the MBC congregation and you're a voting member, I really appreciate you giving me an audience here. And I'm going to thank you for asking. I'm going to try to get right to the chase then, since you brought it up. So the issue is, there's clearly a problem when you have an 80% drop in attendance with the leadership. And so some of this was part of the lawsuit was to try to get fair elections, because many of us feel the leadership is destroying the church. And this is a congregational church with an election process. The leaders are not, immune from being removed from office if the congregation doesn't wish it. And the leadership is pretending that people that oppose them are somehow against the church. So Philip's question is, why is the church voting to pursue a settlement approach? Is it really necessary for the church to vote on this action? Okay, so I'll just go right to the chase. Some individuals think, and I'm going to go to the Restore McLean Church, and I think the best explanation is this one, that was, let me click on this, that was made by someone who I personally don't know, but it was an excellent, and it's beside the point who this is because the analysis is perfect. So this letter details why many of us think with the leadership, that is David Platt, Wade Burnett, etc., are trying to do this settlement out of court. Oh, greetings, brain bug. So the answer is, why is there a maneuver now for the church to try to settle out of court? Is it really necessary for the church to vote on this action? And I can answer the first question. The second one is kind of like, I don't know. I actually never thought of that. But let me just read this because this is a great analysis. In Brainbug, since you joined late, I'm just to update you. This is a church dispute, and it's not. I'm trying to say it's not really theological. I think it's about hundreds of millions of dollars in control, and who can line their pockets. All right. So that's why there's a lawsuit involved. So let me just read this. Okay, a response to MBC's recent email and why members should vote no to their plan for lawsuit resolution. Many members do not realize that over the last 2 years, there's been a major struggle split within the MBC church body, resulting in a significant percentage of its membership leaving to attend other churches. Sunday attendance has dropped significantly from a high of approximately 18,000 just 4 years ago to less than 4,000 worshipers presently attending all campuses. The steep decline is not attributed to COVID. That's just as a comment here. Nearby churches where McLean members have left to, so McLean members left McLean, went to other churches. Those churches are now setting records for attendance. So they can't use COVID as an excuse. So now let's continue here. Current MBC leader, okay, so from 18,000 just 4 years ago to less than 4,000. Now, we can wrangle over the precise numbers because there's like an Easter Sunday effect that can inflate or whatever, but that's materially about the right number. And I'm saying it's actually less than 3,000 on Sunday. Current MBC leadership has grossly misrepresented what is happening with the legal complaint filed by 5 of its church members. They have erroneously accused this group of violating Paul's instruction to Corinthian believers to not go to court against one another, 1 Corinthians 6, 1-8. But this is a misapplication of biblical teaching. 1 Corinthians 6, 1-8 is about fellow members in a church going to court against another to settle disputes, when there is an existing way in the church to handle those disputes between members and attenders. It does not pertain to a situation where church leadership has violated the church's own constitution and forcibly interfered with the established methods for the congregation to correct such problems amongst its leaders. Interestingly, the Bible actually calls us to rebuke such elders publicly. Interestingly, let me see that. Interestingly, the Bible actually calls us to rebuke such elders publicly. I'm doing that now, guys. So for all the accusations that I'm causing division and sowing it, I'm doing my biblical duty. Oh, this is so kind of you, Brainbug, and God willing, we'll do a show. Thank you. Yeah, I actually got threatened with arrest and jail by MBC leadership. So thank you for supporting, for expressing your support. And I don't put it beyond them to take some legal countermeasures against me or try to, because I am publicly making life kind of like uncomfortable for them. And more on that later. But anyway, let's proceed. So that's 1 Timothy 5:19-20. The Bible actually calls us to rebuke such elders publicly. Further, Acts 21 through 22 talks about Paul being arrested for a crime he did not commit. After his arrest, the commander brought Paul inside and ordered him lashed with whips to make him confess his crime. As they tied Paul down to lash him, Paul said to the officer standing there, "Is it legal for you to whip a Roman citizen who hasn't even been tried?" In this instance, Paul was using his Roman citizenship to protect himself. There is nothing wrong with asking the court system to enforce the law, so long as it is done with the right motive and pure heart. Okay, now I'm going to get on my soapbox just a little bit. And a Christian mother at McLean Bible, who was no threat to the congregation, but who was asking uncomfortable questions about finances, and also she happens to be married to someone the church leadership really doesn't like. Christian wife and mother, in front of her kids, the leadership had armed security of the church threaten her, and then recruited Fairfax County Police to issue a summons to her for trespassing. They drug her into court, trying to get her thrown in jail and fined. So, if you look at all that pious behavior in tonight's congregational meeting, it's like, oh, that was all kind of just whitewashed over, that sort of behavior. And a lot of people know what's going on behind the scenes, but some people don't. 2 months before this lovely young lady was so horribly threatened and abused by the church leadership and their armed security, the same thing happened to me. I was pulled out in the middle of a worship service about 9:15 a.m. at the Loudon campus, October 3rd, 2021. Then 5 counties were served letters from McLean to their law enforcement saying, Salvador Cordova, if he appears there, he'll be subject to criminal prosecution. That's how they treated me. What was my infraction? Was it that I was there reporting the truth? That I was showing that graph, that infamous graph of here it is. Was it me showing? I knew when I published this graph on the internet, I said, and that was like September 30th or so. I said, in a few days, if I go to church, I think they might threaten me with arrest and jail for just doing this and reporting the truth. And sure enough, they did. Now, to what extent they did that, I don't know, but that would be an interesting question. So let's return then to this and back to Philip's question, why are they trying to settle? And I'll tell you why. It is important to note that the Bible does not forbid lawsuits. Furthermore, our judicial system is based on Judeo-Christian principles. James Madison proposed the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which included freedom of religion and the right to trial by jury in all civil cases. McLean Bible Church is established under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it enjoys the protections and advantages of both state and federal law. MBC is able to solicit and receive tax-deductible donations, greatly enhancing its ability to raise money. Current MBC leadership regularly utilizes protection from the Fairfax County Police Department and has, in fact, misused the police to trespass members and attendees who lawfully attempted to make their views known in congregational meetings. I didn't even try to make my view known in congregational meetings when they trespassed me. They pulled me out in the middle of a worship service. I was not causing any disturbance. And if McLean leadership wishes to contest my account of things, you do have security tapes, don't you? You have films, and I'd be interested in what testimony you can dredge up about any threat I had to the congregation. Not to mention, I do have someone who was a leader in the security team that has since left McLean because he was kind of fed up with what was going on. He was on the security detail when Donald Trump came to my church. If he felt that I was any threat to the congregation, he would have spoken up. Okay, so praise God, I have Dr. Sandy Pigeon, who's appeared on this channel, in my defense. Retired Navy SEAL, part of the security team at McLean. So I'm just pointing this out. So, so McLean has in fact misused the police to trespass members and attendees who lawfully attempt to make their views known in congregational meetings. It is understood that in 2021, MBC applied for and received about $1.8 million under the federal PPP program, that's Payroll Protection Program, for COVID relief to cover payroll expenses. Finally, it must be noted that MBC is governed by its membership under Virginia law, which holds that in a congregation ruled church, the church's constitution is tantamount to a contract with its membership. And we have on videotape McLean Security threatening. Go to McLean, go to this website, restoremcleanbible.com. Go to this website, go to the section under hurtful issues, and I'll show it. Let me see. Why don't I just kind of show how to navigate there? We have here, so go to hurtful issues, go to threats. The opening threat is from Mike Kelsey saying he finds it difficult not to torch all white people. He's a big Black Lives Matter advocate. There's a picture of Pastor Mike Kelsey. He's one of the 3 leading pastors there. But here's videotape of the chief of security threatening all the congregants. It's just unbelievable. Just go hear how he's threatening the congregation in a congregational meeting. In a congregational meeting, the members have the right to shout out in the middle of a meeting to demand a point of order. That's customary. And yet he's threatening you with arrest and jail if you exercise the customary congregational right. So they're suppressing dissent. We have it on videotape here. And then he was saying, if anyone's videotaping this or reporting this publicly, please leave. Please identify yourself and leave. It's like, gee, do you not like the fact that what you're doing might leak to the public? It might leak to your own congregation at some point and come to haunt you? That you are threatening people? So, this is Soviet style running of a church. This is a dictatorship. This isn't a congregational church. Okay, so let's get back to the issue here. Philip's question, why is the church voting to pursue a settlement approach? Okay, let me just jump ahead because I'm sorry this document didn't immediately answer your question, Philip, and I hope you're still around to hear the rest of the answer. The basic reason is they want to avoid having to answer things under oath. Because let's say hypothetically, and then I'll get back to this document. Let's say hypothetically, oh, David Platt, can you tell us if you have financial incentive if you're deposed from leadership? Do you have financial incentive? I mean, how much money would you lose if you were deposed? How much? David Platt, by the way, are you aware of what it means to be indirectly compensated? I mean, like maybe you could get fees from speaking that end up going to a nonprofit, but then that nonprofit kind of has a under the table deal to kind of compensate you in a different way, like arranging conferences so you could sell your books. I mean, something like that. So, this is a very uncomfortable situation when he has to answer this under oath. Why don't you list, the $500,000 you might stand to lose if you're deposed from leadership? And, this would be very painful if this gets on record. You know, if a civil crime is committed, there has to be a motive. A smart lawyer, and I don't know if integrity law will prosecute, but I mean, if I were on the legal team, I'd go after this angle. It's like, okay, we have to establish a motive for rigging the elections. This is about rigging the elections. Trying to go for an out-of-court settlement will kind of just alleviate you of having to face a jury trial and to answer tough questions about your motivations, and that you're maybe not really an impartial party to all this, that you have a lot of incentive to play like you're very pious and honorable and caring and loving, despite the fact you've been abusing people, threatening them on record with armed security, trying to get them dragged into jail, using all sorts of draconian tactics. That's just, it'd be really nice to try to settle so you don't have to go on record in front of a jury and have the transcripts available. It's like, oh no, I don't, can you imagine him trying to say, oh no, I don't have any financial incentive. I have nothing to gain financially by staying in power. Obviously, that probably would not be true. And if he says, no, I didn't rig the elections, I had no motivation to rig the elections, and then if the lawyer and the judge see that you did, that looks kind of bad. Are you going to say, oh, it was an accident, I happened to just use security to suppress dissenting opinions? It's like, did you knowingly try to suppress the flow of information? And did you spread things you knew were not quite accurate in order to sway the votes? One, if he says, no, I didn't do that, this is all free, we were encouraging people to dissent publicly and dialogue in congregational meetings, and then you have these videotapes of security threatening anyone who doesn't follow the orchestrated congregational meetings. There are all sorts of things that look very problematic. So you could either perjure yourself in a jury trial, and right now there's a discovery process where there's subpoenas of documents, there are depositions. So not only they're probably going to depose the leadership, they're going to depose the employees. And that's going to be interesting if they do that, because then the employees might give a different perspective. So you either perjure yourself or you admit you're misleading the congregation. Either way, you're stuck. So back, Philip, if you're still listening, I hope that tries to answer, why is the church voting to pursue a settlement approach? Yeah, if I were trying to hide something, I'd rather not be taken under oath and either showed that I'm not telling the truth, the whole truth under oath, or telling the truth under oath and admitting that I misled the congregation. That's a bad situation. So I could see why, they suddenly got so charitable and said, we just want to reconcile and move forward. We're doing this because we love you. But you know what? After about, my estimates are, $300,000 wasted of congregational money, and you're losing round and after round in court, and now you're facing a jury trial, suddenly you've become really charitable and want to kiss and make up. You had plenty of time to fix this long ago, starting with, let me show you this picture, starting with this June 30th meeting, where you had your chief of security threaten the congregation with McLean's armed security. If you had just opened the congregational floor for discussion rather than use draconian methods, this wouldn't have happened. But suddenly now, that you are facing reputational damage or the possibility of perjuring yourself, suddenly you just have such, just, oh, we want to settle because we love you and care, and we want to move a church to thriving. I mean, guys, I got to credit you. The act that you put on today should win you an Academy Award. I mean, goodness. I mean, you all look so pious and sincere and loving and caring. And, to people who haven't been at the other end of the gun, figuratively speaking or literally, yeah, you look like really honest, decent, caring people. But to the people who've been victims of what you've been doing, it looks pretty different to me. And, you know, um, this picture here of being threatened, and you could play the tape, it was so funny. All these threats were being poured out on the congregational meeting. And at the end, the chief of security says, "Please know that we love you." Please know that we love you. So, I got to credit the team there. They put on a good act. They really do. Oh my goodness, it was good. And that's why I opened the thumbnail with that Spurgeon quote. The difference between discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. If my Christian faith had been rooted in just the act of this appearance, this show of sincerity, I might have left the Christian faith, because at this point I'd be pretty cynical and think this is all a sham to grab money. But the Christian faith is rooted on the belief of a historical event that Jesus rose from the dead, and that's what we study here on this channel. Because there's plenty of reasons to disbelieve the Christian faith based on the behavior of church leaders around the country. So Philip says, so pursuing the lawsuit resolution may prove that MBC leadership has a good chance of losing, or embarrassing facts coming out, or both. Yeah. Okay, let me, you bring up a good point here, Philip. Okay, let me try to address this. If they lose, one, they may be trying to at least placate the judge and say, hey, this is all just such a, we're trying to meet the other side halfway, and they're not trying to meet us. They're being really unreasonable, but we did try to have this resolution. So can you just dismiss this case? So part of this is kind of a window dressing before the judge to say, hey, we're reasonable guys. We're trying to meet you guys halfway. We've met 90% of the demands, quote unquote. And they're hoping the judge will show mercy on them. Because the alternative is they actually go to trial. One, if they lose the trial, let's say they win the trial, but they have all these bad facts come out about like their financial interest in this, and that even though in the formal sense they may not have been ruled to have rigged the election, it looks really suspicious. It will not look good before the congregation if any of this is circulated, and it'll cause a lot of reputational damage. I mean, they've already damaged their reputation. They've lost 80%. I don't know how that church can sustain its revenues when you lose 80%. They're claiming to sustain it, and that's a whole nother story, what's going on. And then what happens if they actually do lose the lawsuit? There is a revote, and it's done a certain way according to the prescription in the plaintiff's complaint, and then they're deposed from leadership. I'll tell you what could happen. I'll tell you this could be totally scary if they're really doing underhanded deals. Was there the books could be opened? Could we find out that they've misappropriated federal funds? That's felony counts. Could we find out that there's money laundering of some sorts or misreporting? I'm not saying that there is, but they're certainly violating the Constitution, as far as I can tell, in not letting people that want. Every member has the right to inspect the books and conduct an audit. And as far as I could tell, people who've tried to do that have been stonewalled. So some basic questions. How much money is David Platt making? Directly and indirectly. How much is being funneled to some of his organizations? How much is being funneled to some of his friends of congregational money? People he's had business and professional relationships with. How much is being funneled? How much is being wasted? You follow the money trail. And there are all sorts of contractual things. Who are the trustees who own hundreds of millions of dollars of property on behalf of the church? Would you be, if you took over leadership, would you be able to just kind of line your pockets directly or indirectly? And so if they lose and they're deposed from power, and then there are these audits and investigations of documents, and they also remove the non-disclosure agreements that they have imposed on people, non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. So finally the staff can say, oh, hey, some of the dealings that were done look kind of suspicious to me and I didn't feel good about it, or I saw this or that happening. Oh yeah, they have a lot to lose depending on just what they're hiding. I mean, if they're not hiding anything of dirty dealings, then they shouldn't have anything to worry about. But if they knowingly did some of these things and it comes to light after they're deposed, I mean, there's been some jokes floating around among some of the elderly women that they're talking about the fashions that the leadership might have to be wearing when they're in jail. I mean, yeah, there's a lot at stake here, Philip. There's a lot at stake here. Do I have, I mean, what do I have to gain by getting involved in this except standing for what I think is right? When I talked to that young Christian mother, that young Christian wife and mother, about what the McLean leadership had done to her, that finally did get really under my skin. And I said, the level of double standards here is terrible. The leadership talks about love and caring, and they do this to an innocent young Christian wife and mother. And I said, this seems to me not about a theological dispute. I think this is about money and power, a lot of money and power, in the hundreds of millions. This isn't like the theological disputes you hear, the argumentation on the internet about doctrine. No, this is about tangible, powerful stuff. Money. It's about money. And I've sensed that from the very beginning. And, so that's what they stand to lose. That's why they want to try to at least give the appearance they're trying to appease the plaintiffs and trying to make the plaintiffs look as if the plaintiffs are unreasonable and can't be negotiated with. That's my guess, okay? So that's my call. Now, it would be an interesting question under the deposition. It's like, do you know that what you really were trying to do was to placate? Is that correct? I mean, you're trying to placate. I mean, are you trying to avoid discovery because you're hiding something? I mean, the jury trial and the deposition process can ask some really uncomfortable questions. have you been forthright? Do you think the process you've conducted was really fair, or were you trying to stuff the votes? Were you trying to ensure you had the numbers? Were you putting people under surveillance like Salvador Cordova to see who's talking to, and then the people he talks to, you start to try to confront? I mean, I have evidence of that. Are you going to deny that you have had an active campaign to, um, uh, kind of discourage people that you have identified as your opponents in a vote? Is that why, by the way, you were requiring IDs to put on the vote? The ballot was not secret, so you knew who voted against the leadership and who voted for. Uh, did you use that? Did you leverage that information in any way, um, to, like, say, take action against their livelihood? Because some of the members of the church are also employees. I mean, there are all sorts of just really probing questions that you just don't want to be made public. Yeah, it's just kind of uncomfortable. So I could see they're going to just do this. Now, Philip asked, is it really necessary to vote on this action? And I think so. As I thought about this, I think so, because to conduct a special congregational vote, I think constitutionally you need the congregation's approval to do a revote. And I think they feel they need to. I don't know if it's even constitutional, so we'll have to see. Sal, the one thing I believe the Lord taught me through all this from the spiritual standpoint was I put so much faith in the MBC church, unconsciously elevating to a kingdom of God level. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that, Philip. Thank you for sharing that. And, I just want to say, I'm not the most holy person either. I'm flawed. I would be scared if someone were elevating me, because I look at myself and how I live my life. It's like, yeah, I want every individual to put their trust in Jesus. The confession is you believe Jesus rose from the dead. He's your Lord and Savior. I'm just a troublemaker on the internet. T-Mac, is the lawsuit going to be dropped since they are doing things the correct way now? The premise that, if you can clarify, they are doing things the correct way. No, the lawsuit's not going to be dropped because they're not doing it the correct way. They are misrepresenting this revote. And I will get back to the details of this. I opened the show by saying the difference, discernment is, this was Charles Spurgeon saying, discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. So what they're doing is almost right, but it fails in a key point. And I'm going to get into that. So, oh my goodness, I know who you are. T-Mac, your father called me. Your father called me when I was trespassed and threatened with arrest and jail. And it was probably because you saw my testimony. And I want to thank you, and God bless your dad. So let me cover that. Oh, so since you identified him, Tom McMahon, God bless you, T-Mac. I know who you are. Your father speaks very highly of you. And I will say a prayer let me say a prayer for your dad right now. Dear Lord, I thank you for Tom McMahon. I had the privilege of being introduced to him on June 30th. And I thank you that he called me to comfort me, and that he was so troubled with what happened to me. And I thank you for his children who have faithfully followed you. In Jesus' name, amen. So, oh my goodness, thank you. So Elder Tom McMahon, I also know former elders like Mark Gottlieb, and there are others. So the question is the lawsuit going to be dropped since they are doing things the correct way now? The problem is what they're proposing is actually another rigged election. So in some is they're not doing it the correct way. They've actually, this supposed revote is not really a revote. It's a revote with stuffed ballots, so to speak, illegitimately affected member rolls now, because they have been targeting people that they don't want, former members or longtime attendees. I happen to know a woman who has served McLean Bible as a teacher for over 2 decades. They had no problem with her teaching. She applied for membership, and she's not happy with the leadership. They realized that she wasn't happy. They would not allow her to vote, despite the fact she's been a contributor and teacher in the church. But they would let people come that have sworn loyalty oaths ahead of time. And this is loyalty oaths to elders who may not have been duly elected. So it's like you're having the elders kind of run this vote, and they may not even legitimately be in power to run a vote at all. So this is an interesting legal question if they're doing it right. I'm assuming the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are saying, no, we're not going to accept this. And by the way, we want a discovery process to find out what's going on, if there's been any financial interest that is motivating the stuffing of ballots, so to speak. And I'll describe what I mean by stuffing of ballots. They're trying to use, I'm not saying they're doing it completely illegally, but there are some things that are questionable enough that a judge might rule and say, that's diluting the votes. So just strike my word, stuffing the ballots. They're diluting the votes in a way that is in violation of the spirit of a constitutional process. So some of us are hoping the judge will make a ruling and say, if he doesn't use the word rigged election, he will say that all this conduct was illegitimate, not in spirit of the contract that McLean leadership is under obligation to execute. So just, I'm not really technical in legal language. So we'll have to see how the judge characterizes all this. But let me go back to what's going on here. So there is serious risk here that if just going back to Philip's point, if the judge rules and the current leadership are removed from power and the books are opened and all the documents and signed contracts carefully examined, the emails, the communications, and then all this deposed testimony, the way it looks to me is there is risk that we might uncover something that could be a federal crime. We don't know. We don't know because of all this stonewalling. I mean, I don't know what to think. But certainly there's not enough transparency to kind of eliminate doubt. So let me frame it that way. I'm not accusing anyone officially. I am saying that there is so much opaqueness, so much that the rest of the world is in the dark, so much lack of transparency. We can't eliminate doubt. And that's very disturbing. So let me just read the last sentence here. It must be noted that MBC is governed by its membership under Virginia law, which holds that in a congregation-ruled church, that church's constitution is tantamount to a contract with its membership. We're a congregation-ruled church, not a dictatorship. Need to point that out. The pending lawsuit is asking the court to mandate that MBC conduct its church business in accordance with its constitution and act to follow its long-established precedent of conducting business meetings under Robert's Rules of Order, allowing its members to make motions freely express their views in support or against such motions, and then vote by secret ballot in certain situations. Long established practice for elder elections, and that would include the election of Tom McMahon. In the most recent email, MBC leadership announced a special online congregational meeting for Wednesday, May 18th, which is just a few hours ago, at 7 p.m. to hold a vote on the church's plan for lawsuit resolution. If passed, this plan would bring about a number of changes to the Constitution. Here are two notable constitutional revisions found in their plan. Constitutional revisions. It elevates David Platt's status as teaching elder to that of a duly elected elder. Article 6, Section 1 states that the Board of Elders shall consist of a minimum of 6 elected elders plus the pastor teacher. David Platt is only on the Board of Elders by virtue of his being pastor teacher, not because he was duly elected as an elder by the congregation. Elevating him to the status of a duly elected lead elder will grant him higher authority than what has been provided for in the Constitution. All right. It calls for location pastors to present a 6-man governing board and a 6-person nominating committee to the church. In the event elders do not receive a 75% vote of confidence, this would be a significant constitutional change, shifting the selection of the interim governing board and elder nominating committee from the congregation to the location pastors, who in fact are paid employees under the authority and control of the pastor. The Constitution currently empowers the congregation, not location pastors, to nominate and elect the interim governing board and elder nominating committee. Changing this process would be a significant revision to the Constitution. Article 3, Section 2 requires the congregation to be notified of any proposed constitutional revision at least 3 Sundays prior to a duly announced business meeting. MBC's recent email announcing the May 18th meeting less than a week in advance does not come close to providing the required notice for voting on such a constitutional revision. Okay, so I'm sorry for, I should have showed all that. First of all, apologies. You can go to the restoremcleanbible.com and you can click. Let me just show you where to click if you wanted to find this document. You just go to the home page and you click right here, this little thing in. The reason it's in smaller font is this is the official press release from the law firm representing the plaintiffs. This is kind of a capstone commentary. And this one is this letter that I'm reading from. The recently elected elders interview new members, and the new members were voted in, so they are now new. The recently elected elders interview new members, and the new members were voted in. So then, are the new members allowed to vote? Yes. Short answer, yes. In this, yes. They sound like the Biden administration with shenanigans. Yeah. Let's go, Brandon. What's been in the dark needs to come to light. Platt has made a mess everywhere he's been. And Deb Laskaya says, thanks, Al, for explaining what's happened. Could it be that MBC leaders do not want the discovery process? Yeah. Absolutely. And I was explaining the discovery process could depose them. So they'll either purge themselves or have to admit, that they were not being forthright with the congregation. I mean, that's how I'm calling it. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that I'm not insisting that I'm right. But let's say they're under this deposition process, which will also be part of the jury trial. and say, David Platt, do you have a financial interest if you're deposed from power? I mean, are you aware that if you lose this lawsuit, you could be deposed from power? Um, how much money, how much financial interest do you have in winning this? Innocent question. David Platt, I mean, do you feel that, I mean, did you take measures to ensure that you were in power, including suppressing uh, dissenting voices? I mean, were you trying to like have people threatened with arrest in jail because they opposed you and were raising? I mean, were you at all motivated to do that? I mean, were they under? Or did they really pose threats, physical threats to the congregation? I mean, these are good members in standing. I mean, these will be really uncomfortable questions to answer under oath. I mean, David Platt, you're referring to you're telling your congregation on July 18th and July 4th not to visit blogs. I mean, was it because you didn't want people to hear what other members of your own congregation were saying about your leadership? Is that right? I mean, were you concerned that maybe some votes would be swayed if they listened? Was that why you said that from the pulpit? I mean, there are all these kind of uncomfortable. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah. So could it be that the MBC leaders do not want the discovery process? Absolutely, they don't want it. Maybe something that is hidden that needs to come to light. May God do it for his glory. Yes. I can tell you, I don't think any of the plaintiffs, they have a lot, they have nothing to give. I mean, all right, let me show you what, I mean, did the plaintiffs really want to take over a church that is in this state where they've lost 80% of the revenue base? Can you imagine? I mean, this is like trying to take over the Titanic after it got hit by the iceberg. I feel, I mean, this is just my opinion, and I can't, um, yeah. Take care later, later, Cram. Thank you for showing up. Um, yeah, take care, guys. Um, much love to you all. Blessings. Um, I think they're doing this so stuff comes to light. So I'm sorry for all the constitutional stuff that I was covering just now, but what they're trying to do here, just to explain briefly, the congregation should be nominating the elders, not a committee that Platt and Wade Burnett appointed to get elders, because that's a conflict of interest. That's a conflict of interest. If you're trying to stay in power and you're under threat of a lawsuit, this looks really bad that you're going to nominate elders who are going to back you rather than letting the congregation vote on the nominees. So that's what all that, the way I interpret all that legalese, okay? You can read it for yourself. In the same email, current MBC leadership announced an online meeting for Wednesday, June 1st at 7 p.m. to vote on elder nominees. We believe both the May 18th and June 1st announced meetings are illegally constituted. We believe both the May 18th and June 1st announced meetings are illegally constituted. Now, bear in mind, we're talking about control of $200 million worth of property. Illegal really does matter here. And that any actions taken in them will ultimately be declared invalid by the court. Not only has there been insufficient notice for the two meetings, but neither one provides an open microphone for members to ask questions or to advocate for opposing viewpoints. The church claims voting will be by secret ballot. However, by holding the voting online, the leadership can and will continue to monitor who gets to vote and how they vote. I mean, this is just ridiculous that they claim it's secret. When they clearly know who's voting and how. I mean, my name, I mean, if I were a voter, my name would be attached to this. Both meetings will not come close to resembling the definition of a legitimate business meeting as commonly understood by society and by Virginia corporation law. Virginia corporation law. The meetings are not in person, not at a specific location, not held within a reasonable time frame, 2 to 4 hours, not days, not properly gavelled in with minutes read, not having a measurable quorum established, and with no provision for members to advocate their views at the meeting. Instead, the meetings are being held as a one-way presentation online rather than in person, thus preventing any dissident views from being heard by those in attendance. By keeping the voting open for 4 days, it allows MBC leadership to harvest as many votes as possible from as many people as possible with no checks and balances to prevent fraud. MBC claims that an independent neutral observer shall oversee the voting process and vote counts at the new election in order to ensure the integrity of the voting process. This is the same claim MBC leadership has made in past elections. However, the independent neutral observer has been an attorney from the law firm Holland and Knight, the same firm representing the church in court. He or she is hardly an independent neutral observer, and using them raises conflict of interest questions about their representation. Notwithstanding our belief that the court will ultimately invalidate any actions taken at these two meetings, we recommend those in attendance vote no on May 18th to the plan for lawsuit resolution, no to the elder nominations on June 1st, and no to the acceptance of any new members. We feel it is appropriate and fair to restrict new membership at this time in order to prevent the current MBC leadership from padding the votes by adding new members, presumably unaware of the current turmoil, who are brought in by leadership solely for the purpose of lobbying their votes. Please realize that despite MBC's claim to the contrary, the court has already rejected all of their attempts to have the plaintiff's complaint thrown out. The case is now in the discovery phase, where the plaintiffs have asked the court to require MBC leadership to provide answers to interrogations, production of documents, requests for admissions, and deposition of witnesses. To date, MBC leadership has failed to respond to these discovery requests, instead filing motions to delay or avoid producing these answers, admissions, documents, and witnesses for deposition. It is understood that the court hearing has been scheduled for May 27th to deal with a protective order being proposed by MBC's attorneys. This order would outline what information released in discovery would be considered as confidential and how such info would be handled. We believe it is abundantly clear that current MBC leadership is trying to avoid disclosure of the facts in this case. We further believe their plan for lawsuit resolution is nothing less than an attempt to alter MBC's constitution to prevent the congregation from moving forward following a possible elder vote of confidence loss. We also believe they want to use the passage of this plan to mislead the court into believing they have complied with the relief sought by the plaintiffs and that the case should now therefore be dismissed. Please review detailed page letter, click here, which was presented to the elders early in 2021, which was never properly responded to. We hope all MBC members will make the effort to prayerfully review the facts as we who stand with the plaintiffs have done, and ask God for guidance and direction. And it ends with a quote from Jesus. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I'd like to thank all those who've joined me live and by recording. God bless you, and may the truth set us free. Thank you very much for your generous time in hearing this late night talk. I do want to say just briefly, I used the word stuffing the ballots. That's probably the wrong choice of words, and I apologize. And I retract on this video that I used those terms. There are some terms I probably threw out that were probably a poor choice of words, and I'm happy to retract those. But the way this document was stated, I think, is just marvelous. And I will defer to the judge to to make a ruling on these things and to articulate it with the right language, the right legal language. So thank you again. Thank you all who've joined this stream. And some point we'll go back to our regularly scheduled programming that talks about creation science and archaeology and other evidences for the Christian faith, evidences that show that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Anyway, regards, God bless you. And T-Mac, thank you for showing up. Love to your father who served McLean Bible as elder for so long. God bless him. God bless you. God bless everyone here. Have a good evening. Take care.